So I think film photography presents new challenges to us. Even if we're experienced digital photographers, the very fact of taking a film camera, loading it with film, and having to think more in depth about what we're doing, presents itself with a new learning curve, if you like. I mean, it's a bit of a gentle curve, but there's always something more to learn, something more to do, and I think it reinvigorates interest in photography. I think another important aspect of film photography is that we get to spend more time making photographs than spending time on computers. They're a necessary evil. But even with a hybrid workflow, as I happen to use, shooting film, scanning and working in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever, it still incorporates the computer, but I'm actually using a lot less images to get a final print. My outflow is to print something at the end of the day. So I think that's far more meaningful to me, and I would hope it was meaningful to others, that it's much more relaxing. There's a lot less time staring at these things. So with regard to equipment, for the cost of a decent digital camera body and a lens, what would that be? £1,000, $1,500, depending on what currency you're operating in. You could reasonably expect to put together a decent film system, whether it were 35mm or medium format. You get an awful lot more for your money, I suppose. In 35mm, you'll buy a lot more lenses than you would in medium format. But if that's what you want to do, if you want an arsenal of lenses and two bodies, $1,000 would, quite honestly, fill up a kit bag 3 or 4 times over, I think. And let's not forget that film cameras dating back, 30 years or more, they're not going to become obsolete to you or I. They're already obsolete to the masses, to people interested in photography who are shooting on digital or their phones. The obsolescence has already occurred. What you pay for a camera today, you're likely to get in return when you come to sell it 6 years from now, 20 years from now, if not probably more. I personally think that film images are just beautiful. There's something. It's hard to emote exactly what it is about film. But one thing's for sure. There's an awful lot of money being spent and an awful lot of effort into generating software and generating plugins to go into the manufacturer's software to make digital images look like film. So there's definitely something there. There is something that people appreciate, whether it's on Instagram with filters that are built into the platform, or whether it's plug-in filters for Lightroom or On1 software or whatever it is that you use. People are trying to emulate it. But in truth, no matter what you do to emulate that film look, yes, you can generate the same kind of color palette, but what you can't do is emulate the light fall off, the tonality that film gives you, that digital certainly doesn't. And it's clearly visible. So I think it's also worth mentioning that with the money that we are able to save over chasing this digital train, if you like, updating cameras every 12 months, 6 months, or whatever it happens to be, even more frequently for some people, this marketing train that has occurred in digital photography seems almost like it's out of control. But it leaves, if you keep your money in your pocket, so to speak, as opposed to updating a camera every 5 minutes, it leaves so much more of your hard-earned cash available to go out and actually take photographs, to put yourself in environments, if you like. I mean, save the £500 or dollars on upgrading, and buy a train ticket. Go off to some city somewhere, go have a new experience, or buy a plane ticket. If you live in Europe, go to another European country. If you live in the States, go interstate. Go out there, shoot pictures, absorb the environment. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're recording experiences, and the best thing we can do is put ourselves in new environments. If you want to stimulate yourself to take great photographs, keep putting yourself in new environments, whether that is in your own garden, in the local park, in a new forest that you've not explored before. It doesn't matter, but definitely by having a few extra pounds or dollars available to spend, it means you can invest that in making photographic art, as opposed to just constantly updating equipment. So what about the costs involved? Well, if we consider that there are various outlets to acquire film cameras, film equipment, and whether it's flea markets, car boot sales, antique stores, charity shops, you can invest as little as a few pennies to make a pinhole camera out of a cereal box. Maybe it's that cereal box your friend emptied, before he took a picture of whatever it was he was having for breakfast and posted it on Facebook. The cereal box and some gaffer tape. All you need then is a roll of film and some processing. So it gets as simple as that. The chances of buying from one of those resources previously mentioned, a 35mm film camera that's in full working condition, anywhere from £3 to £5, $7 to $10, I don't know, somewhere like that. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. I mean, there's no shortage of equipment, whether it's Russian, Chinese, Japanese. It's everywhere. I mean, just go to a car boot sale and take a look around. I know when I lived in the States, I used to go out to garage sales in the spring, and I could easily purchase 20 or 30 cameras in a morning on a Saturday going around garage sales easily. So cost is not an issue. I mean, it's negligible to acquire the equipment. Okay, so what do we look for when we go out to acquire an old film camera? Well, this, for example, is a Praktica. It's got to be at least 30 years old, maybe 40 years old, and I acquired this one just recently at my local car boot sale. I paid a total of £5 for it. So it's M42 screw mount, very robust body. It's not a brand that you will hear many people speak of, but at the end of the day, just remember, it just needs to be a light tight box that transports film from left to right in the back of the camera, and providing the shutter goes up and down, side to side, whichever direction it travels, providing that's working, and the timing of it is all functional. That's all you need, and a lens on front. So first of all, what I would do is open the back of the camera and have a good look inside it. As you can see with this one, and most that I find personally, you open the back and they look brand new. Well, obviously not brand new cameras, but to be honest with you, even cameras that are 30, 40 years old, they've likely only seen a handful of film through them in their entire lifetime. Even back then, people didn't really take a lot of photographs. Photographers might have taken a lot of photographs, but a camera like this might have been in the family household. It may have been taken on holiday, on vacation, but this is hardly being used. So the other thing to look for, it's even got some. It's got the transport card on the back of the film plate. So the chances are that this camera body is or is brand new in essence and may have never been used. It certainly looks like it's never been used, and that's the original card that's over the transport body. You'd have to take that out in order to make this camera function. So over and above that, shutter speeds. I mean, you're going to basically just travel through the speeds, opening from the B setting. B stands for bulb, but in actuality what it means is that when you have it on bulb, the shutter will remain open until you take your finger off the shutter button and release it. So for long time exposure, is basically going to open the shutter. You're going to use a watch or your phone or whatever to calculate an exposure time, and then just go up the shutter speeds and just try them. Just one at a time. And even if you don't know what a 60th of a second should sound like or look like, providing that incrementally as you go through the speeds, click by click, if they're getting faster as you go through, and it's barely perceptible, the difference between 500th and 1,000th of a second, so it might not even be possible to discern the difference. But if they're all functioning, the chances are that the shutter mechanism is absolutely fine. Of all the cameras that I've picked up and looked at, it is a rare occurrence when I find one that actually doesn't work. And it's pretty obvious that it doesn't work at that time. So other than that, looking through the viewfinder, making sure that it looks clean and bright. It's other obvious things. Make sure the mirror doesn't have any cracks. Make sure there is no other physical damage. It should be absolutely fine, and hand over your money. With regard to lenses, two basic things. One is the focus barrel. So make sure that the focus ring is nice and smooth, that it's not sticky. Even a sticky one can be fixed, but honestly, if what you're going to spend is $2 or $3 or £4 or £5, whatever it is, it's really not worth the effort to fix it, unless of course you have done your research, you've dropped on a little gem, like a Carl Zeiss Tessar, like this one happens to be, right off this camera. It would be worth then, finding a video, taking it apart, doing some lubrication yourself. Hey, they're fairly simple pieces of equipment, and even if you don't want to do it yourself, there are resources out there to get a lens fixed. But in general, if it's kind of nasty, if it's marked, if it's scratched, walk away. Maybe the camera's great, maybe the lens is a piece of junk. Well, negotiate, buy the camera, and then keep on looking and find the lens that goes to the camera. In this case, this is not a Praktica brand lens. Any M42 screw mount lens would go on this camera. So if it was from it might be a Pentax branded lens. If it's 42mm, that would work. It could be Fuji, it could be Shinon. Any of these derivatives going back 30, 40 years ago, if it's 42mm, it's going to fit on that camera body. So the other thing would be the aperture ring. Just make sure that the indents of the aperture ring are nice and smooth, that you click from the lowest number to the highest number, and just take a look through the lens itself. With the lens off the camera, it's important because some lenses are connected mechanically to the camera body, and you won't necessarily see the effect of changing the aperture on the ring until you actually depress the shutter, unless you use your stop down metering button. And if you're new to film cameras, then if you're not familiar with how to do that, I would just take the lens off the camera and then physically take a look to see if that's working. And if that still doesn't work, then it might be that there is a mechanical link, as in this one. It has a pin at the back. Push that pin, and as you turn the ring, you'll find that that aperture, the blades close down, and all you're looking for is they go from wide open to a tiny hole, just indicating that everything's working fine. So it's pretty straightforward. So with that said, I'll go ahead and hand over your money, and there's your camera. Which camera brand it happens to be, you know, to begin with, it doesn't really matter, does it? And we've got a Praktica here, I've got Olympus OM20 there, I've got numerous other 35mm cameras in my cupboard that I pick up for a few pounds here and a few pounds there. It doesn't really matter, so long as it's functioning and it's light tight. And you'll find out if it's light tight when you do your first film test. Another thing to look for is when you do open the camera back, just have a look. You'll see there's little Velcro seals run around the edges where the film back closes. Just have a look at those and make sure that A, it's got some seals in there, and B, that if it does have them and they're a little chewed up, if you happen to have a light leak when you do your first film test, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Again, you can obtain these very inexpensively from Amazon or other numerous outlets just for a couple of pounds, and you can just repair them at home yourself. Again, there are lots of resources on YouTube, videos to watch that show you exactly how to do that. So I'm fairly confident about two things. One, that 30 years from now, film will still be available, and that there will be at least one of the current manufacturers producing one or two, or maybe more, modern film cameras, whatever modern film camera might look like, whether that's a film camera with a USB port or whatever that technology happens to be down the road. But then, you know, I hope it doesn't kind of go necessarily that way, because then we're into that perpetual update cycle again. You know, a USB ported film camera today is going to have different requirements 30 years from now. So taking that aside, I still think that one manufacturer, existing or newcomers to the market, are going to be producing new film cameras. So what about the actual hard cost of film photography? Well, the cost of a roll of 36 exposure film, colour film, is anywhere between £3.50 to £5, depending on what brand, quality you buy. I'd certainly recommend to anyone to pick up, you know, at least a half decent brand of film. In black and white, Fomapan is a really useful film to use. I think you can pick Fomapan up for about £4 a roll. On the developing side, processing, it's probably going to cost you on a per roll basis around, you know, six to £7, I think, including postage. I'll put in the notes below a link to the lab that I use here in the UK, a lab in Birmingham, and that's about the typical cost. For me, it's about £6.50 if I were to shoot 35mm. It's about £8 a roll if I do medium format. But of course, in real terms, it depends how many rolls of film you want to shoot in a week, doesn't it? One of the beauties of, and one of the compelling reasons that film photography presents is by being able to slow down, by being able to think more about your photography. So therefore, you know, I would say to start out, if you are shooting more than 1 or 2 rolls a week, you're probably going too fast. You know, keep those costs down by controlling what you photograph. Put some more thought into it, and control the cost. You know, there's no reason why it shouldn't cost you more than equivalent of a couple of cups of coffee or 2 pints of beer to create images on film. With regard to what kind of film to shoot, I think what I would recommend any of my students to do going forward would be to either choose to shoot black and white or choose to shoot color for a period of time, and then select a brand of film and stick with it for a period of time. I would also recommend that newcomers to film photography choose an ISO film of 400. It's going to make life a little easier. It's going to give you certain parameters by which you can work in both bright light and low light. But the advantage of keeping some things constant is that you're going to get a better feedback loop. You're going to be able to look at the work that you're doing, be able to monitor your process, figure out what's working, what's not working. If you scatter all over the place and shoot color one week and black and white the next week, you shoot ISO 200 one week and 400 the week after, you're sort of all over the map. That's why I think it's really important, and I would say do this for 6 months. Shoot one brand of film, black and white or color, one ISO, and work through the process and get familiar with the equipment and with the film stock that you're using. Every film stock has its drawbacks. Every piece of equipment has its drawbacks, but they also have their advantages. And so you kind of work with what you have, play on the strengths and improve on the weaknesses. There's a workaround for an awful lot of things. If that particular film stock doesn't work for a particular kind of image, then don't shoot that particular kind of image. If in the early days it kind of doesn't work for you, I would suggest you switch out really early, but maybe you start black and white, and after 2 rolls of film you're thinking, I don't like black and white, I really want to shoot color. I'd probably make that switch at that point and then just keep moving on. But certainly I wouldn't get 2 months into it and then just decide I'm just going to shoot color. I think it's really important to, and I stress this, to figure out the medium and the equipment and learn on a nice constant a curve, by which you can get this constant feedback about what's going on. I think it's testament to the robustness of all film cameras, given the fact that some of these cameras are going back 30, 40 years that we can easily acquire. I think it's hard to imagine that 30 years from now, the digital cameras that we're using today are still going to be fully functional. It might be the camera turns on if you can find the charger to charge the battery, but the chances are that computers are going to look very different from the computers that we have today. My dog is down by my feet, by the way. It's not me heavy breathing, that's my dog. The computers are going to be very different from what we know them as today. So the idea of taking out an SD card, plugging it into a computer to read it, I just can't see that being a viable possibility. And we have to stay in this perpetual cycle of updating cameras every couple of 3 years to stay ahead of the technology curve. And I'm not quite sure where that's going to go, but I think it's a fundamental and compelling reason why film today is as relevant now as it was 20 years ago at the beginning of the digital photography revolution.